And nearly a month into the Iran war, the humanitarian impact is being felt across the region. And the US-based human rights activists news agency estimates more than 1,400 Iranians killed in just the first 3 weeks of fighting. Humanitarian organizations, including Medecins Sans Frontieres or Doctors Without Borders, warn of the need to protect civilians as health facilities come under severe strain. We have in the studio MSF's international president, Dr. Javid Abdelmoneim, with us. Good to see you. Thank you for being here. It's special that you're in the studio with us. I mean, we've looked at pictures there, right? And the scale of the violence is big in Iran, in Lebanon. Other names are also being included in this. Zooming out, it has become a regional war. From MSF's perspective, how would you characterize the humanitarian toll across Iran, Lebanon, and the wider region now?
Yes, thank you for having me. I mean, it's really quite alarming. I mean, this escalation happened practically overnight, and it's across tens, if not 15 countries. Actually, if you look at Afghanistan, Pakistan, all the way to the eastern Mediterranean coast. We're seeing the largest impact in Lebanon, as your report just said, with over 1 million people displaced. This is in the context of widespread evacuation orders from the Israeli military, serial aerial bombardments in civilian areas, and also attacks on healthcare. Some 50 or just over 50 hospitals have been attacked now, and emergency medical response teams too, causing deaths. So that's an alarming pattern. That sounds familiar to what we've all seen happening in Gaza, and you can imagine then if there are 1 million people imperiled, it's really worrying.
Yeah. In the case of Lebanon, it's not just mass displacement, Doctor. It's families forced to flee again and again. What does that kind of repeated uprooting do to people's ability to access even the most basic healthcare?
Indeed. I mean, we've seen all of this some 15 months ago in Lebanon. This is a country that has a population, about 3/4 of the population that live below the poverty line. So it's a fragile population and fragile healthcare system. The sheer violence and the evacuation orders have meant in a large swathe of the health system is inaccessible. So what we've had to do is move mobile medical clinics to the population. So we have 12 teams around the country. It's been a nationwide response just in these last 3 weeks. But also imagine that many are not in shelters and are homeless. So we've had to distribute food packages, we've had to distribute blankets and bedding, but also drinking water.
Drinking water, this one I have to ask you about, because we know that at some point temperatures are going to rise in the Middle East. There's growing concerns about all this water access, especially if critical infrastructure becomes hit. So how quickly could this then, the lack of water, become a second compounding humanitarian crisis?
Oh, well, listen, I mean, water, you need water before you need food and shelter in a classic humanitarian response. So it's urgent and almost immediate when you have a large number of people displaced. Don't forget that also without effective hand washing, without safe and treated drinking water, you have a large increase in transmissible infectious diarrheas. You also have airborne diseases and so forth. So water is critical for life. And that's why in most of our responses, we always take care of that part too. Thankfully, we haven't seen that yet in Iran. We've been running, since before the war in Iran, 3 small clinics for marginalized and excluded populations. But because of the overt violence there in South Tehran with continued airstrikes, we've not been able to keep that clinic open at this time, whereas in the other 2 cities they are.
You talk about scaling up MSF's facilities in these conflict regions. Does anything to do with the tough oil prices right now bother you, and what concerns do you have?
The concerns that we have are that, you can see that there's a potential for a global shock here. And it's not just in fuel prices, but it's also in potential for fertilizer, urea, and global food production. That's slightly further away. More immediately for us is that we're working in all these countries already. We already have projects for excluded, marginalized, and dependent populations in Iraq, in Syria, in Jordan, in Palestine, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, and in Iran. And so for us, it's been the movement of supplies that have been disrupted, the movement of staff, and actually just keeping staff safe.
And Doctor, you've worked in crises from Sierra Leone to Haiti, a long resume you have. What concerns you now most about how the world responds to conflicts like this, particularly when it comes to maintaining humanitarian access and long-term attention?
Absolutely. I think we're at a period of time now where it feels that the norms, the adherence to laws which should protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, particularly healthcare, in times of conflict, are being increasingly ignored. With no accountability for that. So we've seen systematic attacks and destruction of the healthcare system in Gaza by Israel. We see attacks in Sudan by both warring parties. We now see attacks in Lebanon. The Iranian Red Crescent is reporting multiple health facilities attacked in Iran. It goes on. The right to healthcare, the access to healthcare, the safety of civilians in conflict is paramount. Even war has rules. And those rules seem to be increasingly abandoned.
And despite rules perhaps not being followed and the number of crises around the world mounting, are you having trouble attracting people to come and work with your organization because it's potentially getting even more dangerous?
It does feel like it's getting more dangerous with the attacks on healthcare I've described. I think, thankfully, the world's spirit, the spirit of in every one of us, that solidarity, the urge to want to do something is present, ever present. And I don't think we have a recruitment problem at the moment, but of course, we have to put in more stringent measures to make sure that our staff are safe. And that gets more difficult when the framework for that safety, the laws, are being abandoned.
And you're just a few months into the job.
Yeah.
Congratulations on this, job that sounds great on paper, but I know it's challenging for you. Does this moment feel different from all the other crises that you've worked on before?
Yes, I've been doing this work since 2009. I don't think I've yet seen an instant overnight regional war, and don't forget that Afghanistan and Pakistan started conflict the night before the Iran, US and Israel. So 15 countries from Afghanistan to the Mediterranean. That's a huge and frightening thing to have to face.
Yeah. Back to the work of the MSF, it's warned that health facilities are under severe strain. You're telling me all about it here. Based on your experiences in places like Syria and Gaza, what actually happens to a healthcare system when it's pushed to this point?
Well, what happens is, usually the healthcare system will pivot and try to meet the biggest need in front of you. And if there's mass violence against civilians, then it'll be trauma care and surgical care. What can then happen is that, particularly with a displaced population, but also displaced health services, is that maternal care, child care, vaccinations, mental health care, and even chronic disease care stops or is very, very much reduced or interrupted. So you have the secondary effects of conflict well beyond injuries and deaths. You have all this other illness and what we call excess deaths, more deaths than would have happened had the health service not been disrupted.
You talked about maternal, but I noticed in your notes as well that you focus a lot on, the outcomes for children. Tell us about that.
Well, you see, children are vulnerable. Children are susceptible to infectious diseases. They're the first to succumb to malnutrition in food insecurity. If you can't give the full broad spectrum of vaccinations, then any small illness, any small infectious disease, a mild diarrhea can trigger acute malnutrition. You also have attacks on children. Sexual violence has become a weapon of war in many contexts, and that doesn't spare children, sadly. And of course, a child is just forming their experiences. Their brains are plastic, they're malleable. These sorts of deep instabilities and lack of safety for proportionally what's the greatest part of your life as a child. A 1-year war for a 5-year-old is a long time. That is a life-changing experience from which it's very hard to recover.
As we can see, lots of broken childhoods here, and let's just hope for the best. Thank you so much for your insight and for the good work you do with your organization. Dr. Javid Abdelmoneim is International President of Medecins Sans Frontieres, speaking with us here at CNA.